Pessoal, não vamos esquecer de acionar o sino.
Olá, combatentes do Canal ARTE da Guerra. O ex-fuzileiro naval Scott Ritter é um dos comentaristas militares mais prestigiados do mundo, né? Ele serviu como oficial de inteligência do Corpo de Fuzileiros na Operação Desert Storm, né? Libertação do Kuwait em 1991. E posteriormente foi inspetor de armas de destruição em massa na Organização das Nações Unidas. Ou seja, ele é mais do que qualificado para falar sobre os temas militares. Então é com muita satisfação que nós assistimos a live que o canal da Nova Resistência fez com o Scott Ritter hoje, dia 14 de outubro. Então eu vou deixar para vocês agora um corte dessa live, tá? E o link aqui na descrição também para vocês conhecerem depois, tá? Vocês acessem a live na íntegra para vocês conhecerem não só o Scott Ritter, mas também o canal da Nova Resistência. Então assistam agora, depois vocês vão lá no canal, tá? E se inscrevam, deem o like e compartilhem. Vamos ver então esse corte da entrevista do fuzileiro naval Scott Ritter. Acompanhem conosco.
Então, eu vou fazer uma pergunta voltada para aquilo das mais recentes práticas ucranianas, com algumas com apoio ocidental mais explícito, outras mais suspeito, né? Mas em essência práticas terroristas, né? Que têm mudado a atitude russa nesse conflito, mobilizando ali o aparato de Moscou, de uma operação militar de mobilização parcial para a desmilitarização da Ucrânia para uma operação de caráter antiterrorista. Então, eu vou fazer essa pergunta se ele acredita ali no envolvimento ocidental nessas práticas terroristas e quais seriam as consequências desse envolvimento. So, Mr. Ritter, my question is related to the recent instance Ukraine has assumed as a terrorist state, making terrorist plans and attacking Russian citizens and civil infrastructure. So recently the New York Times published an article saying that the US intelligence believes Kiev is behind the attack that murdered Darduguina, but US has nothing to do with it. We also have the Nord Stream sabotage episode and all the case of terrorism such as the Kerch Bridge and the attacks against the Zaporozhye nuclear power plants. And so considering the relations between Kiev and the Western intelligence, do you believe in Western involvement in these terrorist actions? Okay, we know that episodes such as the Nord Stream sabotage was clearly made by the West, but the cases in Ukraine or in Russia, such as the Darduguina case, so do you believe that the West is usually involved in these situations? And can we consider cases such as this New York Times article as a way of trying to rid the US of possible consequence? Because Russia is considering the operation now as a kind of anti-terrorist operation. We saw this with the calling of General Surovkin, the Armageddon general. So, and if the Ukraine state is a terrorist one, so could NATO be considered as a sponsor organization of terrorism? So, how do you evaluate this terrorist scenario?
You know, the United States spent 2 decades waging a global war on terrorism to hunt down and bring to justice the perpetrators of the crimes of attacking the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and attempting to attack the American Capitol. Our approach was that Al-Qaeda was a terrorist organization, and that anybody who provided assistance to Al-Qaeda was a sponsor of terrorism. Nobody debates that. Everybody agrees. If Al-Qaeda is a terrorist organization and you're supporting Al-Qaeda, You're a sponsor of terrorism. Let's take a look at that New York Times article. The CIA is calling up the New York Times and saying, we think the Ukrainian intelligence service killed Daria Dugina in Moscow. Daria Dugina was not a combatant. She was a journalist. Her crime wasn't to order an attack on Ukraine, but to think freely. You can disagree with Daria Dugina, but that doesn't mean she deserves to die. And yet she died. It was an act of terror. It was an act of terrorism. Every definition of terrorism, political terrorism, fits the crime that was committed. The CIA acknowledges this and says that the terrorist organization was the Ukrainian intelligence service, which was acting on the orders of the office of the president of Ukraine, which makes the Ukrainian government a state sponsor of terrorism. This isn't me saying this. This is the CIA saying it. Now, they don't use the words terrorism or terrorist organization or state sponsor of terror. But Daria Dugina was killed by a terrorist action. That was murder, political murder. It was not an act of war. So the CIA is in effect saying that this was terrorism. So what does that make the United States, who continues to pour tens of billions of dollars into support of the Ukrainian government, a state sponsor of terror? We are now sponsoring state terror. What does that make NATO, who supports Ukraine? They are also state sponsors of terror. There is no escaping this. And it's not just the assassination of Daria Dugina. Ukraine has carried out another terrorist attack against the Crimea Bridge, using a suicide bomber in a truck filled with explosives is an act of terrorism. Even if the bridge itself is a legitimate military target, the mechanism used to attack was a terrorist mechanism. It's not justifiable in the laws of war. The bottom line is, Ukraine is a terrorist nation. They use terrorist tactics, terrorist techniques, and the United States supports this. That makes my government that which we rightfully condemned after 9/11. We condemn terrorism in all of its forms. We condemn the sponsors of terrorists, and yet we have become that which we claim to loathe. It's inexcusable in any way. There's no way to defend what we have done here. And I'll just point this out too, just as I think we call it disclosure. I'm on the same list that Daria Dugina was on. She's on a hit list published by the Ukrainian intelligence services. I'm on that list. They're trying to kill me as well. But that's okay. I'm a big boy. But, it's not okay for Daria Dugina. She was innocent. She was not a combatant. Her murder was an act of terrorism. The Ukrainian government murdered her. They are state sponsors of terrorism, and America is a co-sponsor of terrorism by continuing to support the Ukrainian government.